thank you, Secretary, for joining us for the Black Rifle Coffee Podcast. I cannot wait to get into this. You touched on a little bit downstairs, but I wanted to kind of go over some of your initiatives that you're doing right now around, I would say, the cultural landscape in the military and how it's reshaping from the current administration and what you're doing to combat the narrative.
Well, first of all, Ivan, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you. It was wonderful to be out here at Black Rifle Coffee today. You all are doing amazing work. I'm not a huge connoisseur of coffee, but it was really good. And so thanks for having me out. And to meet your team was incredibly special as well. So bless you for what you've built and what you're continuing to build and the things you do for all the old guys who like me, who served for a long time. You care about them, you love them, and you are incredibly decent to them. So bless you and thank you for that. You referenced this project. It's more than a project. It's on my heart. As someone who just admires those who raise their right hand and decide to serve, who knows that this is a bedrock institution for our nation, to watch it at risk because we've lost the bubble, we've lost the ability to focus on the things that matter to the United States military. Excellence, merit-based promotions, hiring, decisions, recruiting of just the finest, and we've traded it for a set of priorities that are different than that. Cultural things of the moment that will be fleeting, and they will move us away from the heritage and the traditions that have made our military so powerful, so successful, and importantly, have been a bedrock institution for the country. And so I am working to try to remind political leaders, senior military leaders, enlisted and officer alike, civilian seniors working in the Department of Defense, that there's a single mission for the United States Armed Forces, and that is to be prepared to defend and to fight if the Commander-in-Chief calls them to do that. Everything else, your race, your gender, all those things are immaterial. Excellence and merit must be the singular focus for these institutions, and if we lose that, we'll lose an awful lot. And I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but I'm worried we're headed the wrong direction. We talk about green vehicles, green tanks, green fighter jets. We need them that are capable to protect our soldiers and our warriors. And when you lose the bubble, when you move away from excellence as the sine qua non, as the singular most important thing that you think about every day, when you get up and do your mission as a soldier, sailor, airman, marine, or now in the Space Force, when you lose that, America is at risk.
But you referenced something that you talked a little bit about downstairs, which was the current administration. They were in Germany in the first speech to the military. What was the primary objective, or how did you frame it? You'll have to.
So President Biden told this story to a group of young service members. He says, "Look, the most important thing you're going to do during your life, during your generation, your time in service, will be is climate change."
Right.
And look, sign me up, Evan. I'm sure you'd sign up for this too. We want clean air. We want safe drinking water. Those are important things. But for those young warriors, they weren't looking for a safe space. They were looking for leaders who were prepared to give them the tools and the training so they could be excellent in their chosen profession, the thing they were doing in their life for that moment to defend America. Mm-hmm. That's what they raised their right hand to do. And to hear from your commander-in-chief, your president, that the thing you signed up for, the reason you decided to enter service is no longer an imperative, it's no longer the most important thing, had to be incredibly disheartening for them and for those around them. And certainly for me watching it, thinking about the young people who are 16, 17, 18, thinking about heading to the recruiter's office, thinking about going to OCS, thinking about thinking about doing ROTC, whatever it may be, it had to cause them to think twice about whether that was the place they wanted to be in their lives.
Right. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you was, we talked a little bit about it downstairs, here and downstairs, which is you've started 3 weeks ago, was it? So, and what's the organizational effort around that?
Yeah, so we're building out a team under the rubric of CAVPAC. Okay. So CAVPAC, I was a cavalry guy.
Okay.
So CAVPAC. It also, CAV stands for Championing American Values, which is at the core of what you do here at Black Rifle, right? These traditional values. These aren't Republican or Democrat values. These are American traditional values, and I think we can all grab them. So CAVPAC has now started this campaign. And it's been shorthanded by the progressive left as though he's just fighting wokeness. That's part of it. The wokeness is dangerous for sure. But what it's really about is ensuring that the culture and the the traditions and the heritage of our military remain the focus of our military senior leaders. So we are working as a public matter, talking to E4s, E5s, and E6s, and middle-ranking officers, O3s, O4s, O5s, junior officers, saying, I know you're confronting this, whether it's the vaccine mandates, where they're kicking folks out of the service, or it's a diversity, equity, inclusion training program that's teaching you that if you're white, you're racist. That you don't have to fight it every day. You don't have to blow yourself up in place. But there's a partner. There's someone out there that is prepared to help you, to defend you, to take care of that. The things you're doing to be excellent every day will be rewarded. And then we've got an effort that is more of an effort inside of the senior leadership and the political leadership to convince them to move away from those ideas as being the central focus. I'm happy to have a diverse United States military. I was telling you earlier the story that my first tank gunner, when I was a young lieutenant with my first scout platoon in an M1 tank, was an immigrant to the United States of America. Happy to have diversity. But I chose him to be my tank gunner not because he was a diversity candidate, but because he was a really good tank gunner.
Right.
And our senior political leaders need to reflect that, reward that, and mandate that the senior military leaders adopt that as their singular focus as well.
So do you think that this is, from your perspective, you spent a lot of time in Washington, you kind of understand the culture, much more than me and a lot of the listeners, do you think that this is something that the current administration, once it's voted out,
right?
Do you think that you can rebuild, and not to even take that vernacular, but do you think that we can rebound from this? Do you think that we can take that aspect back, or rewrite the bubble, so to speak, from this narrative? Because I see it, just matter of fact, I went through Special Forces Assessment and Selection in 1999. Nobody was looking to make sure that we had, African American, a Hispanic, and a Caucasian. It was who was selected was based on the performance of what we were put out. So it was based on your merit of work. And we did have a very diverse pool of people that were selected and put onto an ODA.
Yeah.
So do you think that we can rewrite the ship? Do you think that this is just something that's in vogue right now culturally? Do you think, kind of unpack that narrative for me a little bit, from your perspective?
Well, first of all, I do think so.
Okay.
And I'm counting on it. And it will take hard work to do it. It won't happen of its own accord. These things have a force of their own once they're inside these institutions. So you have to go root it out.
Right.
And that rooting out takes place bottom up, crosswise, and top down. And so we've got to go work all three of the pieces of that. But it's going to take a concerted effort. It has grabbed hold. I don't know if the folks who are listening to this heard what happened at the Air Force Academy last week, right? They told the cadets, the Air Force Academy, don't use the words mom and dad. Use inclusive language. Okay, like that's my mom, right? That was my dad. I meant no offense to anyone by it. That's just my mom and dad, right? So they're trying to change the language, the way these folks speak. And so don't even say, hey guys, use more inclusive language. Hey people. These are insidious. These are a nick, right? In their own left to their own devices, maybe harmless in the micro, but in the macro, when you begin to spread this and you begin to adopt these as the central understandings of the institution, it is really, really dangerous. And so you have to get it out, and it can be done. What will it take? It will take three things, in my judgment. It'll take really strong political leadership who's prepared to reverse what, frankly, began in the Obama administration. We tried to root out for 4 years when I served with President Trump, and is now back. Just they're driving as hard and as fast at it as they can. Second, it's going to take a military set of leaders who remind themselves every day of their oath, right? What it is they committed to do. And that may mean they have to buck political leadership. May mean some of them have to resign. Maybe some of them get fired. It is possible. But by the time you're a senior leader, enlisted or officer, or senior civilian leader, that's a risk you should be prepared to take to defend America. I have a different view of younger people. That is a harder, more challenging proposition. It's why CAPPAC is trying to help those folks in ways that the seniors don't need. And then finally, it's going to take an American that comes to see the risk that it presents to them. We've all watched the Russian army fail in the field.
Yeah.
That armies don't work just because someone wants them to work. They work because the folks who are there are prepared to fight and die for the person to the right of them and the left, folks to the left and right are prepared to fight and die on behalf of the country. And I think you can see it today in the recruiting problems we're having. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. I think if you're a young person thinking about joining the military today, for all the reasons we know young people join our military, it's less appealing today because you're going to be at risk that someone's going to say you didn't get vaccinated, you're out. You used language that's inappropriate. You called that person your mom.
Right.
That's unacceptable behavior today. When we see that, folks will walk away from it, and that means we'll have, to your point, you were doing selection in ODA. You just have fewer candidates who are qualified, who have the skill set, who have the moxie, who have the tenacity, the physical ability, the mental stamina, the love of country, all the things that drive our forces forward. We'll begin to lose those, and so you'll have a less effective military. And my real fear is, Evan, is that we won't know about that till it's too late.
Right.
And that's why the fight needs to be today. It needs to be full on, and I'm hoping we get political leadership, military leadership, and people all across the country say, no, let's make sure that this institution, one of the last remaining capable institutions that has been non-political. I don't want a conservative military. I don't want a liberal military.
Right.
I want a highly lethal military.
Right.
If we get American people demanding that, you can fix this and bring it back to the right place.
So 2 questions to follow that up is why is the military being politicized now? And I think it is more than it ever has been. Why? And then 2, how do you get that? How do you get the politics out of the military?
I think it's being politicized for the same reason that the progressive left politicized our universities, our schools, frankly, our churches too, right? They're trying to undermine these bedrock institutions because these have always been the bulwark of our heritage. And I think the progressive left wants to undermine it, right? They want to talk about the 1619 project, not 1776. You had a great picture of George Washington the other day, right? In your break room. That's the heritage of America. They got lots of challenges here, always. We didn't get everything right in the Trump administration either. But man, this is a great place. This is the most exceptional nation in the history of civilization. And there are those in the progressive left who don't believe it and they don't want to teach it. And so I think this is another institution that if they weaken it, if they pull it apart, that it will begin to look and feel more like those other institutions that the progressive left is now taking full control of. And that's my real fear, is that we will water down this core institution in ways that it will no longer be able to perform the most vital function of any of our central institutions. As for how you get it back, getting good 12-step program. the first thing you have to do is identify and say, I have a problem,
right?
And we have a problem, and this is what Gap Back and my efforts are aimed at, identifying it, and then beginning to provide support to those who are already in the right places to make a difference. So whether that's a member of a school board in some community, somebody in a recruiter's office, some 04 in the field who ended up being told that they weren't going to get promoted, to make sure you can rally around them so that people don't feel like they're alone. They understand that there are others out there prepared to help them. To do work on Capitol Hill and in state legislatures across America. Don't forget, we have guardsmen, right, state level folks too, serving in the military who are suffering these same things, especially in Democrat-controlled states, who are more inclined towards this shorthanded with wokeness, more inclined towards this progressive understanding of a military that has. They would say the military has multiple missions, and that's no, it has a singular mission. They want it to also reflect their understanding of America, and that is very political and deeply antithetical to the core institution that the United States military has been since the very beginning, even before the nation's founding.
Right. So shifting gears just a little bit, when you look at strategic threats to the United States, from your perspective, who are our top 2?
Goodness, I'll give you one that you, Evan, would know, and the other that will surprise you. The Chinese Communist Party is clearly the greatest strategic threat. Very capable military, very capable cyber capacity, massive economy, 1.4 billion people. They're inside the gates here at home as well. And so if you said, and by the way, with the intention, right? You learn in the Army, you learn, right? It's about capability and intent. I describe the capability. They have the intention of undermining the United States. They want to tell the story about an America in decline, and they are working to make it so. And so that is serious. We could spend an awful lot of time. That's the greatest external threat. The greatest internal threat is our school system. And if you said strategic threat, I would put, what's the quickest way? I'd put Randy Weingarten, the head of the Teachers Association, as the most singular dangerous threat to the United States. The republic will fall because we teach our kids crap.
Right.
We don't teach them the greatness of our nation. We don't teach them arithmetic and how to read. We don't teach them that it is an incredible privilege to be an American. Instead, we treat them as if America ought to apologize everywhere, that there's an oppressor class. It is a strategic threat to the United States because the next generation won't have an understanding that built this country, that the republic was founded on. That the founders talked about you had to have virtuous people, and I think there is an attack on virtue in the United States, and it is happening in our schools, public schools especially, all across America, and we have to get that back and get the leadership right in the schools. And if we do that, then we'll have the right people to confront the Chinese Communist Party, and I'm confident we can defeat Xi Jinping. I am less confident that we can defeat folks who are trying to undermine the way our kids are raised. That is a bigger problem, and parents everywhere need to take up the cudgel and make sure we get that right.
I've thought about this quite a bit, and I think, based on my previous background and kind of the history of I would say information operations with the evolution of technology, and I want to get your opinion on it. Do you think that this is more opportunist in the fact that our foreign enemies are using these divisions within our society kind of more as we're exploiting the opportunity, or do you think that some of this narrative is directly being driven from them, from external sources, putting in the information and then pushing out through internal? So my point in that is some of this just seems like an information war. It really does to me. It seems a lot of this looks a lot like propaganda. It looks like information war. So I'm just interested from your point of view, do you think it's driven from outside, or is it exploited from interior divisions within the country?
The answer is both.
Okay.
And they are very real, each of them, independently important, and you characterize it exactly correctly. One is they see the divisions inside, and they amplify them, they exploit them. This information warfare is imperative. I talked about the Chinese Communist Party being inside the gates. I mean, I did some great operations as CIA director. I should say my teams did, and I got to watch them and applaud them. The best operation that I was ever part of was when we closed the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas. A massive spy operation inside the United States being run out of the Chinese diplomatic facility in Houston, Texas, of all places. It's truly stunning. And by the way, we'd known about it for a long time. The U.S. government had known about it for a long time and just didn't want to touch it because it was too hot, too difficult. It was a place they were doing each of these two things. One is they were taking and identifying the divisions and amplifying them with lots of different tools of information warfare. And then second, the Chinese Communist Party, Russian leadership, including their GRU, one of their intelligence services, and the Iranians, all three, and I might add the North Koreans, but smaller, are all driving information into the U.S. information space in an attempt to divide the United States as well. And so they use facts on the ground, internal data, and amplify that, but then they also drive their own set of propaganda. The primary narrative is the one that I mentioned earlier. It is that this is a nation, this is a decadent nation, this is a nation in decline, this is the weak horse,
right.
to use the language that Osama bin Laden used, right? Everybody wants to be with the strong horse, that America is the weak horse. And by that, they take our likely friends and allies around the world, and our allies say, I don't want to be with them, they are a declining power,
right.
And they drive that message as well. And we have a responsibility to push back against that. We're at risk of becoming a declining nation. I don't think that's going to happen. I think America is too strong and too resilient. But there are things that would be indicators of that, and we need to, just as with this campaign to preserve our military, we need to protect these institutions so that what it is that Xi Jinping in China wants to happen never happens.
Right. Wait, do you think, I've got this question a lot, which is, do you think that there's a orchestrated effort between those countries? So we'll call it, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Do you think that they're working in combination, like a task force almost? Or do you think they're unilateral actors that are essentially exploiting the opportunity and dogpiling on the circumstance?
I think it's more the latter.
Okay.
I think there's probably some coordination, but I think these are largely nation-state independent actors.
Right.
they do observe each other. So
Yeah.
right. So airlines don't collude, but they watch each other's pricing,
Yeah.
right? So in the same way, the Chinese will say, "Oh, that was a good play by the Russians," and then they will do it. So I think it's less that there's a cabal having meetings someplace, and more the case that they simply are all working towards the same mission set. They are reinforcing the other's successes when they observe them, so that, to your point, piling on.
Yep.
And then identifying best-in-class tools to push it, and then using their combined resources to push those stories, this information and propaganda inside of our country.
So, and I've seen it. We know that social media has directly contributed to the acceleration of the divisions within our society. We, from looking at it from a strategic and tactical point of view, you would think that we would not only identify that, but then we'd have a set of systems around combating foreign influence and information specifically related to social media. Is there a constant conversation in Washington around this that you've participated in?
Evan, there is, and sadly, it's mostly conversation.
Oh, okay, right.
It took us, the Trump administration, until, goodness, maybe the last 12 months before we began to take our knowledge, our understanding of this risk, and actually try to create a set of policies around it that provided a hedge of protection around that and mitigated this information warfare risk. Think about the work that we did to try to take TikTok out of the hands of our kids. We failed. We didn't get done. We started too late, to be honest with you. And frankly, there are those inside the United States government that didn't want that to happen, that for a host of reasons didn't want to attack TikTok. I view TikTok as an information tool with one of the most sophisticated AI tools in the world, who was stealing data and information about America's children and collecting it to improve their own systems. We ought not let that operate inside of our own country, controlled by the PLA or the Chinese Communist Party's intelligence services, the MSS. Really dangerous. So there's been a lot of talk. I think we now have a better understanding about how to respond to it. And had we had 4 more years, I'm convinced we could have actually taken some serious actions that would have. I don't know that you can ever take it down in a free society. It is trickier. But I think we could have absolutely reduced the harm, reduced the risk, pushed back, and begin to impose real costs on the actors that were doing that. Some of which are owned by foreign entities. Those are easier. Some of which are Facebook, Twitter, social media companies that are here and around us in the United States. The president had the right end of the stick about these organizations and the risk that they present to our country. And we had begun to develop a model that I think would have protected the First Amendment. Sign me up. I want everybody to be able to say their piece, even people who disagree with me radically. But this is not that. This is now a censored world, controlled, moderated, curated by some of the biggest companies ever to walk the face of the earth. And the United States has not only the responsibility, but the duty to make sure that that is managed in a way that delivers the First Amendment, true, but also doesn't censor those voices who have an understanding that is different from the folks who are sitting on the decision desk at those big companies.
So shifting out of the social media and getting into kind of your past and looking at the diversity of which you've experienced life, which I think is incredible. So you went from West Point and you served in the military, and then you went back to Harvard for a law degree, right? So from thinking back as a young man, I know there are tons of cultural differences, but when you look at your academic experience, starting out as a young man and former officer in the military, the differences between Harvard and West Point that you found most shocking.
Oh, goodness.
I'm asking you to go back. I apologize.
Good. Just look, institutions just so deeply different. By the way, very different missions too.
Yeah.
I'll credit them for that, but also so culturally distinct. The great thing about my time at the United States Military Academy was I came from a lower middle income family, but I never dreamed I could get into West Point. The highlight of my life at that point had been I was assistant manager at Baskin Robbins in Southern California. I got all the way to assistant manager. I could still do a killer good scoop of ice cream. Might go in your coffee, that'd be fantastic. You might think it distorts it, but in any event. But I got this chance to go to this place where it didn't matter where you came from, right? They were gonna evaluate you as a cadet based on how fast your 2-mile run time was, how many push-ups you could do, and did you get the math problem right? And good team player? Did you demonstrate the capacity to lead? Harvard was just a different experience. It was crazy for me to come. I literally left the service.
How soon
I left the service.
were you?
I literally took my terminal leave to go use that to try to pay for my first semester tuition at Harvard Law School. It was culturally just bizarre. First of all, I had to stop cussing as much. So this was something I still, my team that's around me would tell you, sir, you still need to figure that out. So still imperfect there. But it's just completely different. I think I was the only former, I think there was, each class had 1 or 2 veterans from the Army, 1 or 2 from the Navy. So we were a clear minority. And it had a left of center point of view of the world. And it rewarded skills that were different than the ones that I had brought there. And so I tried to find it where I could. It was a long 3 years in that it was difficult to find people who shared my value set there. There were a handful on the faculty, but just a handful. So it was a difficult 3 years. But I also knew that I could learn. I became a better writer there. I learned to think a little more logically. So I don't mitigate the education that I received there, and I am thankful for that. But if you look at the people that are around me today, they're mostly folks that I knew from my time in the military and not folks that I met while I was at Harvard.
It's interesting because you come with these 2 totally different sets of experiences. But the questions I want to ask is, what were your key surprise moments where you're like, this is beautiful, it's amazing from Harvard that you took away that you'll always cherish?
Yeah, there were a couple of really smart people.
Right.
Even the professors with whom I have, Donnybrook arguments with, they were bright and they sharpened me. Yeah. They made my arguments better. They even in voicing their own view or attempting to voice their own view on me, I learned that the things that I knew from my time, both in school as a cadet and then as a young Army officer, about how you build teams, how you build little tiny high performance teams around a shared set of values and expectations, and about the role of leaders to be subject matter proficient in the things that they do. I could see that this law school, was different from that. It was rewarding things that were esoteric and ungrounded and unmoored, and in fact was often spent a lot of time trying to tear down the institutions that I valued and cared about. There were a handful of moments where some of the professors there really sharpened my ability to think and articulate my vision for how I wanted to raise my family, how to be part of my church, how to be part of what I did for 10 years running machine shops in Wichita, Kansas, and to focus on being able to build those teams. And so I'm thankful for that time, that 3 years. I wouldn't trade it. If I had to do over again, I'd probably still pick it. I might have gone to business school instead. Would have saved me a year, and I would have learned some balance sheet and how to do arithmetic.
How the leaders that have impacted you the most? Who were they?
Goodness, my parents for sure, especially my mom, good Kansas conservative woman, high school diploma, but she was determined to make sure her kids lived a better life, and she sacrificed herself every day, and she taught me. You may not be the smartest guy in any room, but just be the hardest working, prepared to actually work and to give to others and make them better. And when you do, life will be better for everyone. So I credit my mom. I mentioned to you earlier, I had some great NCOs that I worked for and with as a young officer. Sergeant First Class Petrie, Staff Sergeant Navarowski. These were amazing leaders who taught me so much, and I would never have been the Secretary of State without Staff Sergeant Navarowski, right? He literally taught me about how to change tank tread, right? And at the same time, how to make sure that you delivered on behalf of the bigger team that we were part of. And he was tireless and taught me to be equally efforting, to be tireless as well. And then I've had some friends along the way. There was one professor at Harvard, a woman named Mary Ann Glendon, who reminded me of the value of our Constitution every day. I was a research assistant for her. She paid me $7 an hour, and I helped her write a couple books. I don't even know if I helped her, but I did research for her. She reminded me that this is an amazing country, and our founders, right? These Madison, Jefferson, Washington. These people were flawed human beings and cared so much about our republic. They were willing to sacrifice everything in their life, and I value her for reminding me of that teaching me the Federalist Papers again that I should have known from my time as a cadet. Oh goodness! And then I had a couple of great business mentors too, folks who tried to help me along the way. We couldn't get a loan to save our lives. Right? It was me and 3 of my West Point buddies who started the company.
Really?
Yeah. All from my class. What the heck we were doing. We bought a little gear shop on the north end of Wichita, Kansas called Arrow Machine Company. We didn't have any money. So we borrowed it from friends and family, and no banker with their right mind would loan us any money. It sounds like you have a story not too dissimilar from that. But we Mutt and Jeff it together and built a really nice little business. And it was all with my colleagues who I'd known from my time in the Army and from my time as a cadet. There's 4 of us from our class. They were great mentors too. It was a great team. And I drug them to the CIA.
You did?
So Chief Operating Officer was a guy named Brian Bulto, who was my Chief Operating Officer at CIA. He came to state. And Ulrich Breckbuhl was my called counselor at the State Department. He was just really my right-hand man who helped solve problems when I couldn't figure them out. These were folks I'd known 40 years who I trusted and who I valued and whose leadership taught me so much. They're like the team around here, your brothers and your sisters, and you're in the fight together. And doesn't mean you get it right all the time, but when you get it wrong, you shrug, you learn, you laugh, and you drive on. And those folks have been part of my life in that same way.
Thank you very much, Secretary. I appreciate it. One question, one nonfiction book that you would recommend to anybody?
Yeah, there's a book that talks about our society. It's called America Coming Apart.
Okay.
It's from 2010. You can read a short version by a guy named Murray. Short version that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. It just talks about our culture and how it is you can protect and preserve the American way of life.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. Bless you.
Are you ready to get caffeinated? Well, be on the lookout for Black Rifle Coffee's massive Veterans Day sale. Use code VETERAN for 20% off site-wide at blackriflecoffee.com. It's the perfect time to stop and grab some winter merch and America's best coffee that warms the freedom-loving soul. So roll on over to blackrifle.com on Veterans Day, and the sale ends on November 13th.